So while I have taken an indefinite break from commentating, games for CS:GO, I'll still be doing a little bit of YouTube content here or there. And in this video, I want to talk a little bit about the last major we saw at DreamHack and PGL over in Cluj, and kind of sticking to my roots. My first video about the event will be in regards to the North American teams that competed at the event, how the event went for them, what does it mean, what does it maybe tell us about their future and about their outlook going forward. I may also do some other videos related to Cluj maybe a week or so after I publish this one, but in this video I just wanted to focus on North American teams. And I'll start off first with Liquid, as I guess they had the shortest tournament out of the North American teams in the sense that they were knocked out in the first two best-of-ones rather than progressing to the best-of-3 decider. Of course, their first match was going to be up against Virtus.pro. Now, this is a team that they had just played at the PGL finals and had a pretty good map against them on Overpass. It was quite a close game there, though they did get kind of destroyed on Mirage. But we see them play a new map, and this is Cobble. And of course, Liquid had some success on Cobble in the North American seed leading up to this event. We obviously saw them beat Fnatic on it at the PGL final, so we knew it was a map they were certainly capable of. But of course, we know that Virtus.pro is a very capable team in general, and Cobble is certainly one of the maps they don't mind playing. And so it was going to be tough, as Virtus.pro has always had a pretty successful record against North American teams, looking back especially against some of their, matches up against Cloud9 this year. And even dating back further than that possibly. But in this match, they play on Cobble. It is an overtime game. Liquid loses the game 15-19, so a very tight race. In this game, we did see Elige really step up and just have an absolutely monster game on both sides of the maps. Really, really looked good. Fugly and Hiko weren't too far behind either, and those are kind of the two most consistent players I would say you see on the team. Fugly has been for quite some time. Obviously, Hiko has a reputation for being quite a consistent fragger, and since he's joined Liquid, he's really, done his job and has looked, as we expected. But I would say Nitro had a bit of an off game here this game, and this is something I've talked about. If you look, I did a preview video about Liquid leading up to Cluj, so if you'd like to see some more in-depth analysis of Liquid from my perspective, from watching them play ever since they got their fire together and even commentating their games in the NA scene, I talked a bit about this being kind of one of the issues the team seems to have, where it seems like they have some player inconsistency issues. Usually, Fugly and Hiko are kind of exempt from this. I very rarely see them have off games, though we'll talk about Hiko having an off game in just a second when we talk about the Mirage game against NIP at this event. But it just seems like Elige and Nitro rarely have a good game together. It seems like one of them usually is able to go off, but the other one is usually quite quiet. It's very rare you see both of them have a really good game together. I'm not sure why this is, if it's just a player inconsistency issue or because they play difficult roles as entry fraggers. I talked a bit about this, like I said, in the preview video, so I'm not really sure what it is, but it kind of strikes here again. But I don't think that necessarily mattered because you still had three players really going off for Liquid here. So, yeah, sure, if Nitro could have played a bit better, that maybe would have helped them out a little bit. But I think it came down to some other, situations just not going Liquid's way. And they lose this game in a very, very tight race. Still a good showing from Liquid, but not a victory. You now move on to their Mirage game against NIP. Nitro actually does have a good game here in this game. I think he was one of the reasons why they were able to kind of stick in it, so to speak, and keep it a close contest, especially the way he was playing on the terrorist side, opening up bomb sites. Elige, though, had a really off game this game. So, we just saw him play quite well the day before on day one against Virtus.pro on Cobble, but then he steps into this game. He really struggles. This is most prevalent on the CT side in the first half, where he and Hiko, usually another very consistent player, both really struggled to defend the A-bomb side against NIP. In fact, Dream was having a pretty good game with the op on the first half on the CT side. He was playing mid quite well. He was getting picks. He was even rotating to, the bomb sites and getting some kills here or there. He actually had a pretty good number. I think most people didn't really notice that, and I even saw him catch some flack on the desk after Liquid got eliminated from the event, but he actually looked pretty good here. It was really Elige and Hiko who I felt really struggled on the CT side, and that's what really hurt the team the most. They got a little bit of a comeback going in the second half on the Terra side. In fact, I think at one point the score was a tied 11-11, so they still did have a chance, despite having a tough first half, to try to climb back into it and have a chance to, eliminate NIP, and it just didn't work out. They eventually falter. This was a little bit of a tough exit for Liquid. I thought how they had been playing against Fnatic and Virtus Pro at some recent events leading up to the major, and how we had seen NIP on a decline, that in fact Liquid might have a chance here to kind of shock everyone and eliminate NIP from the tournament in the group stages and have a chance to advance at least to the best of 3 decider. But unfortunately, this wasn't the case here for Liquid. Like I said, I thought they had a good chance, but once I saw the map was Mirage, I was a bit concerned because I think Liquid's main maps are, Overpass, Cobble, and Cache are kind of the big 3 for them. Train used to be in the past, but not so much anymore, as they haven't played it much with Hiko, and it's kind of changed for them since Hiko joined the team, so Train's not really much of an option for them anymore these days. They've always been kind of hesitant to want to play Inferno. And they got rid of Dust 2 in the banning phase, if I'm not mistaken, against NIP, which made perfect sense to do that, given that's probably one of NIP's strongest maps, and Liquid's very hit or miss on Dust 2. So I felt the banning phase went pretty well for Liquid. I believe they got rid of Dust 2 and Inferno, so those are good bans. Unfortunately for them, NIP doesn't play Overpass and Cobble a lot, and they took those bans, and so that hurt them. So it came down to a randomization between Mirage and Cache, and they unfortunately drew Mirage. I think if they would have gotten Cache, it could have been a different result, but nonetheless, Liquid walks away from this event in the group stages in the best-of-1 stage. So basically, to kind of wrap up Liquid, we still see some player inconsistency issues here. It's still a few mental mishaps here and there as well on some decision-making. But they seem to still be improving. They still seem to be doing better than what they were doing in the past before they picked up Hiko and before they established their roles really well with getting Nitro back into entry fragging and making Elige kind of a secondary entry fragger, and Adren seems to be handling the op a bit better. He still seems to have some better individual performances on lane compared to the past when he was trying to juggle leading and opping. So I feel like they're still moving in the right direction. I wouldn't make any changes. I think you should give it a bit more time. Obviously, we're about to see them play at the CEVO MLG Season 8 finals. We're also about to see them play at the iBuyPower Cup, and depending on how they place at the iBuyPower Cup, they'll have a chance to play at IEM San Jose as well. So there's a few lands coming up here quite shortly. We'll get to see a bit more of Liquid and really kind of see if they can keep moving in the right direction. But for now, I think this is one of the hottest teams in North America, especially with some of the other teams not performing as well, are kind of having plateaued, which we'll talk about in a second. But yeah, so I think that you can't take too much negative away from this from Liquid. They've done some good things, and we just have to see if they can continue in that direction. Now we'll move on to Cloud9, who did make it a bit further than Liquid. They actually made it to the best of 3 decider, but their first best of 1 match was up against Luminosity on Dust 2. In which they had a rough start here. They start out losing the first 5 rounds, so down 0-5, but they're able to win 7 of the last 10 rounds from the Terrorist side to still make it a respectable half at 7-8 scoreline. They then move on to the CT side. This is where they seem to really struggle. They do, this has historically been a problem for Cloud9 in the past few months. I've addressed this a couple of times when I did my Cloud9 preview video for Cluj, which you can check out once again if you want some deeper analysis about Cloud9, as I kind of capped their pros and cons going into Cluj. But Dust 2 has been kind of just a huge issue for Cloud9 lately, mostly on the CT side. This dates all the way back to the Season 7 CEVO event, where they had a good lead against Mouse Sports in the group stages of that event on Dust 2. I think they had like 9 or 10 rounds coming from the Terra side into the second half, but failed to close out the game from the CT side. We saw them get eliminated from Cologne, the last major before Cluj, against Gamers 2, the exact same situation, 9 or 10 rounds first half Terra side. Flip over to the CT side, unable to close the game. Also, they got eliminated at the Invitational in Dubai from ESL, from NIP, having again a lead in the Terrorist side, 9 or 10 rounds going into the second half, unable to close out the game, wound up going to overtime and losing. So that's elimination from 2 tournaments, as well as some struggles in the group stages there. And now you see them come to this tournament and the exact same thing happens. They drop a game to a team they should be capable of beating, mostly on the basis that they really struggle to get much going on their CT side. They only get 4 rounds on their CT side. Now, in the past, people always, from the community, seem to have criticisms, even myself, that part of the reason why this might be the case is because their CT side was too static. It was predictable. You always seemed to really know where people were going to be. They very rarely did different things. For example, you'd very rarely see them do anything aggressive on the catwalk or make any double catwalk pushes or anything like that just to change things up. It was mostly Shroud in the pit, Ska has the op somewhere on the A ramp, Freakazoid's playing in CT spawn, and then you'd have, Nothing and Sean Gares, either playing together in the B-bomb site, maybe nothing in Freak, kind of a Frostfire mid. Very rarely did they change it up. Very rarely did Skadoodle's op move anywhere. Maybe every now and then he took a mid pick. Maybe every now and then he tried to pick lower B tunnels with the op, but still seemed pretty stacked towards the A side of the map. I feel like they actually did change that this event. Maybe most people overlooked this, but I feel like they did move Skadoodle's op around a lot more. I mean, he was game helper, he was cat, he was mid. I think I even saw him at the back of B one round. So they seem to be trying different things by moving Skadoodle's op around and just trying some different setups. But for whatever reason, they haven't cracked the code. They still haven't found a successful CT side they can rely on to put up consistently good numbers. I think that it is probably one of the hardest CT sides to play in the game, so it's somewhat understandable that teams struggle with it, but it definitely hurt him here. The other big things to take away from this map, because it persists throughout the tournament for Cloud9, is the fact that Sean Gares is actually fragging pretty well this event. He's always caught in flack from some people because he didn't really frag as well as the rest of the team. Of course, a lot of people give him a free pass because he's the in-game leader. That happens with a lot of different teams. I think that he gained such a reputation as being such a great in-game leader from some previous events that we saw, like some POV streams. Were able to hear their communications, and people really kind of saw the value that Sean Gares had, and there was kind of this change in the scene of how people viewed Sean. But nonetheless, that it has been true that he focuses so much on scouting his opponents and developing new strategies and making sure everyone else on his team is in a place to succeed, that his fragging does sometimes slip. But I think I remember hearing in an interview that Sean did leading up to the event that he had a goal of trying to do like 1,000 deathmatch kills a day leading up to the event to really kind of focus a bit more on his fragging, making sure you can choose that department. And he did. He drops 20 kills in this game against Luminosity on Dust 2. He's a top fragger for the team, which is sad because when you have guys like Skadoodle and Shroud who should be kind of your carries, and Sean's out fragging, then that really shouldn't happen. And Skadoodle and Shroud seemed a bit off in this map for sure, and this is something that persists throughout the event. And in my preview video about Cloud9, I kind of mentioned that Shroud particularly does have some inconsistency issues. He will have a really great map where he's dropping near the 30s or something like that, but then he'll turn around and have a game where he's playing in the low teens or something like that. So that seems to be something that still has an effect on this team, and it's still something that Shroud does have an issue with, it seems. Skadoodle, though, usually quite consistent, and he was off this tournament. I think when I was looking at the numbers, the most frags that Skadoodle got in a map was 15, and he had several games where he had lower than 15, and he never got higher than 15. And that's very unusual for Skadoodle, who I feel like I usually see somewhere at least in the high teens, low 20s almost every game. I heard that he did have some issues in Australia as well, but I didn't get to see that event or see the numbers from that, so I'm not 100% sure on that, so don't, quote me on that. But that does also hurt this team a lot. I feel like Skadoodle's op is a very powerful tool for this team, so for that to be missing really does hurt Cloud9. And I'm bringing it up because it persists throughout the tournament. We move on to where they actually did win a map here. They beat Vexed on Cobble 16 to 13. Got 8 rounds both halves, so pretty balanced play. Despite being off on the terrorist side from Shroud, so again, kind of having a weaker game, at least in the first half of this game against Vexed, as he had against Luminosity on Dust 2, he really steps it up on the CT side and helps his team close out the game, so props to Shroud for turning things around in the second half. Freakazoid also had a pretty massive game this game. I know he's caught in some flack for not having the numbers that people would hope for from him, and I think his inconsistency might be something to look at as well, though he does play a difficult role, and he does do his job, and it makes things easier for everyone else. So you have to kind of weigh, whether it's worth it or not, whether him playing his entry fragging role and decreasing that burden for other members on the team, which allows them to be better set up and allows nothing to have more freedom. If that outweighs the fact that maybe he's not going to have, the best numbers all the time. No matter what, though, Freak did have a great game here, and he was a big part of their success against Vexed on Cobble to win this game. Again, Skadoodle is quite off this game. He doesn't really seem himself, but again, Sean dropping 20 frags as well, so it kind of made up for it. As well as, like I said, Freak playing well and Shroud really turning it around the CT side. So that allows him to move on to the decider game. Now, unfortunately for Cloud9, it was Luminosity who upset Fnatic on Inferno, which came out of nowhere. Like, no one really saw that coming, right? So I think if Cloud9 would have gotten to play a best-of-3 against Luminosity, they would have had a better chance to advance out of the group rather than having to play Fnatic early, so to speak. Can't say that for sure, though. We saw how Luminosity, how well they performed, being able to beat Fnatic in this best of one, beating Cloud9 in the best of one, advancing first out of the group, and putting up a pretty solid quarterfinals performance, against Na'Vi. It was quite a close game. Both maps were quite close there. So it's not a for sure thing that Cloud9 would have been able to beat Luminosity in the best of three, but probably would have had better odds. Again, we have to see them play on Dust 2, as we had saw them play earlier in the tournament against Luminosity. In this particular game, they actually win Pistol to get a 3-0 start, but then after that, they got no more rounds after those 3 rounds on the Pistol. They only win 3 more rounds after that 3. So they only get 3 CT gun rounds, or whatever you want to call it. And they get no rounds on their terrorist side. They have a 0.7 second half. If they wouldn't have won that Pistol in the first half, you could just see that they would have got absolutely obliterated, like 16-3 possibly, or maybe even worse. So this was a very, very tough game. Shroud, again, very off game, only 7 kills. The rest of the team were 14 or 15 kills. I think everybody had either 14 or 15, but again, you expect a little bit more out of Skadoodle. He's usually fragging more towards the 20s, and you definitely don't expect Shroud to be dropping 7 like that. Sean Garrett, when he was interviewed about this later, talked about some different mental errors and mistakes that were going on with the communication and how people were, making certain decisions, and he felt that this was a consistent issue that they've been having. It frustrates him that it keeps happening. So you can seem to tell that there might be a little bit of issue there, a little bit of turmoil, that Sean's getting frustrated that, people aren't, I guess, learning from mistakes as well, and they're committing simple errors repeatedly, whatever. It seems like there's something here. He mentioned struggling with pistols, struggling against, anti-ecos and force buys, and just different things that didn't go right, losing 3 versus 2s, things that this team normally was a strength for them, and that kind of comes up here after he gets interviewed about this series. Now, we do see them to go on and play Overpass, where they do have a decent CT side here. They were able to get 9 rounds in the first half on CT side against Fnatic. This is not a bad number. This is a good start, decent start. Maybe you hope for a little bit better, but, 9 rounds is sufficient. But they can only find 3 rounds on the Terra's side. They lose that second half 3-10, and that's how they lose the game. Again, Sean fragging well on this map on Overpass. He had 19 frags here. Nothing had 21. Nothing had kind of a couple of poor performances earlier on in the tournament, so he actually did pretty decent here on Overpass. Shroud even did a bit better with 17 kills, but again, Skadoodle not quite himself with only 15, and just as a team, they just couldn't get it together. But this was, a decent showing, 12-16 score. We know how good Fnatic can be in Overpass, but Cloud9's also shown some close games on it, and even gotten some victories at times on it, so we're hoping they would put up a good contest, and they did, but just, not able to actually get the win there. So what are some things we can pull from this? We can say that Skadoodle's been looking off a lot in this tournament, and even in maybe some of the previous lands as well most recently. I don't really know what the deal is here. This team, relies on Skadoodle a lot. I'm not saying it's the only thing that can get them to win is Skadoodle opping well. They do have other things that can help them win besides Skadoodle, but he's a big part of this team, and it's been a long time since I've seen Skadoodle really struggle this much. And I know a lot of people are talking about, maybe Cloud9 needs to make roster changes. We'll get to that in a second, but you can't really factor in, like, no one would say you should remove Skadoodle and bring in another opper like a JDM or something. No one would ever say that. So I feel like that's the Skadoodle struggling thing, struggling to perform at this event. It's like something you can't really account for, hardly, unless there's some type of inter-clan turmoil or some type of reasoning that Sean calling certain things might affect the way he plays, or maybe he's just in a rut. Just, people do sometimes have these times where they're having a decline in play, and they just need to work themselves out of it. Maybe that's it. Maybe this is just temporary. Maybe Skadoodle will come out next tournament. He looks really good. I mean, again, Cloud9 has the iBuyPower Cup coming up. They have IAM San Jose coming up. You probably aren't going to see any changes from them no matter what until the end of the year, more towards January, a couple of months down the line. So let's just see if they can do a little bit better going forward. Let's see if Skadoodle looks more on form going forward, because this is kind of an issue. I'm not really sure what causes it, but it's weird to see Scott struggle. Shroud's inconsistency still seems to be an issue here. He had more off games than he had good games at this last event. Usually when he's been inconsistent, he usually still has more good games than bad games, but this event seemed to be the inverse of that, and that certainly hurts when both of your star players, so to speak, are having a tough event. It makes it very hard to win when these two guys that usually put up good numbers are both, having off games here and there throughout the event, especially, really key, crucial games. Another takeaway from this is Sean actually puts in a lot of work fragging this event. I kind of already mentioned that he had put a lot of time in death matching. He had dropped a couple of games where he was in the 20s or high teens, so he actually looked quite good this event. And the only reason why I'm bringing it up is there's been all these different rumors about maybe Get Right joining the team. I know that was like a couple of news articles posted about that. There's been a lot of people saying that maybe Sean Gare should move to being a coach and he could be an out-of-game leader, while you bring in another fragger to be a fifth, to play the lurking role or supportive role that Sean used to play in game. So you still have the brains of Sean directing the team, but you bring in another guy who can frag really well. That's been something that's been discussed. I think even Sean and Shroud in different interviews that they have done, different places, have said they're open to the idea of Sean being a coach, and Sean even likes the idea of possibly doing it, thinks it might be the future of the game. There's been all this talk about all that. And let me just say now that could work. Let's just say this rumor is true. If you could get Right, or you could get just some good lurker to join the team, someone that you think is a more skilled fragger than Sean Gares, yeah, certainly that will increase the firepower of the team, and you still maybe have, Sean there to lead the team. But there's two things that you really need to think about, because that could work. That could be a successful move. I could see that happening and working. So let's just say that is a positive idea. But here's two other things to consider. The first thing to consider is what if Sean struggles to make that transition to a coach leader? Maybe he doesn't feel the game the same way. Maybe it doesn't seem the same. Maybe he's less motivated because he's not actually playing. I don't know if any of those things would actually happen or not. Maybe he'd be an even more effective leader because he can look at everyone's screens and really direct traffic better, not have to focus on actually playing the game, so it would free up a part of his mind. So that could be a very positive thing. But maybe for some reason that just doesn't work out as well. Maybe he just doesn't feel it. I don't really know how to describe it. But that is something to just say that's not a shoe-in. It's not a for sure thing that'll be a great thing. The second thing to think about is this. I know it's just one event. I know he has another whole history of events that didn't go so well fragging, but this event he fragged quite well. And it seems like the difference maker was the fact that he actually took a little bit of time away from trying to lead the team and do strategies and scout, which I'm sure he still did all those things, but he also devoted a little bit of time to actually focusing on his individual skill and being able to frag well. And so with that said, if Sean can just drop like 15, 16 kills a game or somewhere around there, he's still a valuable support player. He's very smart. He makes good decisions. He especially plays late round clutch situations well. Maybe he can still be a player on this team. Yeah, sure, you could still maybe bring in a Get Right. Who knows what's going to happen with Swag, with his band, if they can incorporate him on the team. Whatever the case may be, the only point I'm going to make is maybe you should consider removing someone else from the team besides Sean Gares in a player role to bring in a new fifth. If in fact a roster change is going to happen, I actually wouldn't mind Sean Gares just remaining on the team as an in-game leader and supportive player, and you take someone else out of the equation to bring in a Get Right or bring in a Swag if that's possible. If you can bring in both Get Right and Swag, then that's whenever you might see Sean Gares have to step out to make room for two people coming in. But if you're only bringing in one, you might consider someone else. Obviously, role-wise, that person would probably be nothing, just because he is kind of a lurker style for the team now. Not saying that Nothing's a bad player. I have nothing against the guy. I think he has played some of his best CSGO on this team during this era when they've put the roles where they are now, where he's more of a lurker and Freak's your main entry and Shroud's your secondary entry, excuse me. I think he's played some of his best CS in his career in CSGO. So I'm not knocking him, but because of the role that he plays, if you can get a Get Right caliber player, might make sense to make that move instead. Just a consideration to make. If they do decide to keep Sean Gares in an in-game leader role, I think it would still be good to have a coach or an analyst or something to kind of help Sean Gares out, give him somebody to bounce ideas off of. Give just a third-party, unbiased voice to the team to be able to review their play. Because maybe these guys argue and bicker about who's at fault or if something was done right or not. If you had a third-party, unbiased opinion to be able to come in and set things right and clear things up, I think that could benefit the team, because now instead of bickering at each other, your coach is your one dictating, oh, this is where you mess up, this is what you did wrong, this is what you can improve. And so instead of hating each other, maybe they just hate the coach, which is fine. But at least they're getting proper information and feedback without having tension between the team. And maybe there's no tension either. So I'm just speculating. I don't know what goes on there. But I think it certainly could help if Sean doesn't, lead the team to be a coach, that you still bring in a coach. And so I would consider that. And then you could talk about Freak. Has he earned his keep? I already kind of mentioned that earlier. Do the pros outweigh the cons? Does his role and how he sets everyone else up outweigh the fact that maybe he doesn't have the numbers that you need? Are there better entry fraggers you could get? I mean, you could argue that as well. Again, let's just see how the rest of this year goes. They still have at least 2 more big lands they're going to attend in North America here in November. Contracts and stuff for other people they could get probably end at the end of the year. We're still trying to wait and see what's going to happen with player bans in January to see if it was in fact a year ban or not. There's a lot of unknown factors going out there. You certainly won't see Cloud9 make any changes until next year anyhow. So let's just see if some of these kinks work themselves out naturally, just by playing together for a couple more months. And if not, then, that's probably something to visit going into January. Now, last but not least, we'll talk about CLG and their event at Cluj. Again, I did a preview video on CLG before the event if you want some in-depth analysis on how I feel about the pros and cons of the team. But we'll just talk about this event really quickly for them. So they start off in the best of 1, having to play against Navi. They did have a pretty tough group here with Navi in their group. So we see them go up against Navi here on Cobble. They had a close game against them at Cologne, getting eliminated from the tournament at the hands of Navi, where they had like a 14-11, 14-10 lead on Cobble, but couldn't close the game. And that's a consistent issue that CLG has had, which I brought up in the preview video. When you look at IEM Gamescom, you look at Cologne, you look at some other events internationally, they've been able to play some teams close, but even when they have leads, they struggle to close the game. And again, something similar happens here against Navi on Cobble. I'm not even really sure that they were ever really in the lead. It was quite a close game. They actually had a pretty good CT side, but just couldn't really get it going on T side. Part of this is because Hayes plays a key role for CLG on Cobble. He is their Long B platform player, and he really struggled this game. I can't remember how many frags he got, but I know it was a pretty low number. Some things to take away from the event, though, is that JDM looked really good with the op in this map, had 22 kills. He had some really good maps throughout the event, so I feel like, it's something I've been discussing recently is I feel like JDM's been stepping it up lately, and he's looked progressively better every event he's played. And I did interview Hayes before the event, and he talked about how much time JDM puts into the game these days, how he really focuses a lot on DMing with the op and studying demos of players that he has a similar style to, that he kind of wants to use as inspiration on how he wants to play. Like Guardian, for an example, is someone that he looks at how he positions himself and stuff. So he's done a lot of homework, basically watching demos of different oppers, watching his own demos to see what he might be doing wrong and what he can fix, and then just straight up grinding hours on aiming the op and practicing taking shots and stuff. And he looked really good this map and throughout the event. So I think JDM's really stepping up. He's probably one of the top 3 oppers in NA at this point. Behind Skadoodle and I guess Fallen, if you want to count him, since he does play in the North American scene. So yeah, good stuff from him. That's a very big positive for CLG. Tarek also had a pretty good game here with 20 kills. Finesse even had 18 kills here. He catches a lot of flack, but he fragged well. Cutler with 17 kills. So the number is not so shabby frag-wise for the team. I know fragging's not everything, but the numbers are actually pretty decent. It was really Hayes who just had a tough time with only 11 kills on the game, and he plays such a key position on Cobble that I think that really kind of hurt the team. I would say, actually, as a team, again, I've discussed this before, their roles are optimal now with Hayes entering, with Tarek and, JDM opping, and, Finesse focusing on lurking, Cutler being support. I think these are the best roles for this team, so that's a positive. I think they looked better run, with Cutler leading. They seemed more disciplined. Their execute seemed more crisp. Like, for example, I know they lose this game, but you just look at how they attack the B-bomb side on Cobble. The smokes they place, how they use Molotovs to flush out Chicken Coop and Top Tree in certain corners and things to help make it easier for them to actually peek the right places, or at least isolate places to focus on. You compare that to, say, Cloud9 when I was watching them play Cobble against Vexed, where they were just kind of sitting Shroud out on Long B platform with very little nade support. In fact, I don't remember them using any Molotovs on Chicken Coop or Top Tree. Could be wrong about that, but I don't recall it. And I feel like that hurt Stroud a lot. He was getting wrecked by Pete or whatever that had the AWP at the B-bomb side on Cobble. Whereas it seemed like CLG, they had better nades to execute to kind of prevent that from happening. So their executes actually look pretty good. So I think they looked good here. They just didn't beat Navi on a good map for Navi. 12-16, close game. They then go to play Dignitas on the exact same map. Again, a very, very close game. This time they really pick it up on their T side. That was one of their big problems against CLG. Even though they were getting good executes, they were still losing, to retakes or still not quite getting it done. But here on Dignitas, they get 9 rounds on the T side. Finesse almost drops a 30 bomb here, so really kind of performing much better fragging-wise than what people expect. Again, JDM has a good game. Again, Tarek has a good game. Cutler also in the 20s. So you got 4 players with 20 bombs on CLG in this game, which is like a dream scenario to have that many people fragging that well. They still have a close range, though. It's 16-14. They do struggle to close, but they do close is what's important here. I know that's been a big issue for them with closing games. They get it done here against Dignitas. Of course, a weaker team, right? And they go and they play the best of the decider against Navi, right? And we've always talked about how CLG has had the capability of winning best of ones and upsetting teams like they did long ago when they did it against LDLC on Dust 2 at Aspen, or when they've done it, I guess against Fnatic on Mirage at the ESL, ESEA Season 1 finals, or these different events they've been able to do that. Titan, I think, on Dust 2 at one of the major qualifiers. So, but they never really won a big best-of-3 series against a top team. The closest thing to it would be, I guess, beating CSGO, Lounge, and Flipside Tactics to qualify for this event. But you wouldn't even really consider those like elite-level European teams anyway. So, they like when you think about top 10 European teams, they haven't gotten a big series yet. And even Hayes is... or I think it was maybe Hayes, I think it was Finesse actually. He did an interview at the event saying, yeah, the criticism's totally fair. We really haven't done that yet. That really is still something we're struggling to do. But in this series, same thing happens, I guess. They played Train first. Navi's such a great Train team. CLG has been good on it in the North American scene, so I thought there might be some hope. They get 6 rounds on the T side in the first half, which isn't bad, but Navi's C side's so good, I almost felt like even with a good number of 6, they needed a bit more, like 7 or 8, to really be able to do it. Hayes actually does step up and have a good game here. We know that he had a couple of tough games in the 2 best of ones, but on this Train map, he actually did pretty good. Again, JDM opping well with 20-something frags. Tarek was a bit off on this map compared to the other 2 games he had played prior where he was in the 20s. He was only in like the low teens here. Cutler also way, way off. Cutler's one of the things that most people really compliment Cutler on is the fact that he's such a consistent fragger. Maybe he's not their top fragger, but he's always consistently putting in good numbers. This has been a bit affected by the fact that he's taken on an in-game leader role on this team, so I knew that adds new responsibilities, which takes away a bit from fragging. But to be honest, the other maps this event, especially the 2 best of ones, and even when we've seen him at the qualifiers for this event at DreamHack Open Stockholm, or when you look at Gamescom, you look at all the NA scene games, he still managed to frag pretty consistently, which is why this has been such a good move for CLG, because they seem to be better led, they seem more disciplined, they look better, but you still have Cutler being that consistent fragger. But this map, he was way off at 8 and 22, and that really hurt them, I think, just in general throughout the map. Let's move on to Cobble. So it's a rematch on Cobble. The 3rd time these 2 teams have gone head-to-head on Cobble in the last few months. Just once earlier this event in the best-of-1 group stage portion, as well as, of course, at Cologne. They play again. This time, CLG strikes gold, right? They close out a game against an elite opponent. This is a step forward for them. We know they struggle to close games, but this time they finally get it done. First half they get 7 rounds on the CT side, so they start off a round down, I guess, but they come and they get 9 rounds on T, and they close a game. This is massive. They, like I said, so much struggle with this, but they get it here. So good step forward. Cutler really steps his game up. He had such a bad map on Train with 8 kills. He gets 28 this game, so really well done. Tarek has 26. He looks quite good. JDM's a bit off compared to the rest of the maps that he's played throughout this event, but still enough to win the game. Again, they had those clean executes I referred to in their first match against Navi on Cobble on the first day. That's still in effect, but they're actually closing out those rounds now rather than losing the retakes or whatever. So very good game here. This is, I think, like I said, a big step forward for CLG. Unfortunately, they had to play Navi on Inferno. Quite a weak map for CLG. They often ban it. So it's not really one of their big strengths, and they just got absolutely crushed. They start on the T side. They only get 2 rounds. So when you're starting 2-13 going into the second half, that's a tough situation to be in. They actually do start to make a bit of a comeback on the CT side. Finesse is actually doing a lot of work on the CT side. Tarek and JDM also doing pretty well to try to turn things around. I think Tarek winds up top fragging with like an 18-18 ratio. So, I mean, he's, I think, the only person who went positive. But still, a lot of people stepped up in the second half. Like, Finesse had a couple of big holds at the B-bomb site, a couple of good plays rotating arch where he was really helping out. JDM's op was looking a bit better on the CT side. Hayes, though, again, quite off here. One play that sticks out is, like, Hayes was playing in closet, and Finesse was, like, baiting for him at arch, like, pulling people in. And, like, Finesse even gets a kill, and there's two more people trying to push Finesse to trade him out while Finesse is, like, retreating. Arch is a perfect bait setup for Hayes hiding in a closet. But Hayes steps out, two people right in his face, not looking at him, looking at Finesse, can't get a single kill. Like, start spraying, damages both, but they just reaction shot him, and he's out. And, like, they lose a big round on that Arch side. That's just one example that really sticks out. And so that things like that really hurt their ability to try to make a comeback, and they want to get eliminated from the event right then and there. So what's some takeaways from CLG from this event? They do begin to close out some games, some close games, so that's good. That is a step in the right direction. JDM and Tarek actually performed pretty well at this event, especially JDM, so that's good to see those guys perform. Cutler's doing his job. He had one really off game on training against Navi, but outside of that, his fragging was pretty consistent and the team looked better led. So these are all strengths for the team. But we do need to ask that question that I presented in the preview video for CLG before the event that I did, if you want to check that out, which was, has this team plateaued? This five has been together for quite a long time. They still yet to progress from groups at a major. They only have closed out one really close game on a map, it feels. They still haven't won a big best-of-3 series against a top-team European team. So have they, in fact, plateaued? Has that happened? And when you plateau, does that mean you need to make some roster changes? Is some change needed? I think you could argue that they have plateaued, and if they have, then I guess change is needed. Because once you've exhausted all your resources, you swap people around in different roles, you've tried different tactics, you've tried working on different maps, you've basically pushed your lineup to its limits as far as what you can manipulate and change to try to get the most out of your team. If you still aren't hitting your goals after you've done that, then I feel like your only chance, or your only choice rather, is to make a change. Now, what would they change? I'm not really sure. I feel like Liquid is so locked in with their five that you're going to have a hard time poaching from that team. So, I don't even know if that's an option. Same with Cloud9. In fact, Cloud9 are probably going after poaching the same people you might be looking at, and they have more money and power to do it over you, so to speak. Look at Skadoodle, for example, winds up on Cloud9 instead of CLG because of that. So I feel like you're competing with Cloud9 to get certain players, and Cloud9 is probably going to beat you if, in fact, they're going to make changes. So that's what makes things tough. I mean, you can look at some different players, maybe from Conquest, some different players from maybe Complexity. I mean, there are some teams out there where, like, names that come out, for example, that I could see that still have some value are players like Roka, maybe Sanks, maybe Automatic, but mostly Roka from Complexity. I think that from Conquest, maybe a Stanislaw, maybe a Rush. I mean, maybe NAF is still someone to look at for some of these different positions. I don't think you have to worry about opping. I think JDM's done quite a good job opping for his team. So, I don't know what you actually do. I know a lot of people have said maybe Finesse needs to go because he's not leading anymore. He wasn't the problem this tournament. So I don't know if you can scapegoat him, to be honest. At least at their performance at this particular event. What's good for the long road, it's a different story maybe. I know they've been willing to do changes in the past. I know people have been willing to step down from the team if they felt it was necessary, like someone like Hayes. Maybe someone steps down and becomes a coach for the team. They said they want a coach. They haven't been able to find a coach. So maybe you have one in your starting lineup right now that you can move to a coach and bring someone else in to try to see if you can't push the team further. Again, probably not going to happen until next year. This team also has, the iBuyPower Cup. If they can do what iBuyPower Cup, maybe IEM San Jose. There's still a couple of events this team's going to be playing at the end of the year. I feel like everything that might happen is probably going to happen like in January or something. So they still have a couple more events with this five to see what they can do. But if at the end of this year they're still not hitting their goals, then I feel like they have plateaued and change is probably on the horizon. And that pretty much wraps it up for talking about the 3 teams that were representing North America from Cluj. I know you could also say Luminosity since they compete in the NA region, but they're, of course, Brazilian. So I will just say that these were the 3 NA teams. That's Liquid, Cloud9, CLG. We talked about their event. I mentioned I did some preview videos for them if you want to check out some more in-depth analysis about their players and their maps and stuff that I did on the preview videos for Cluj. I went way more in detail there for each team because I dedicated a video to each team rather than doing them all in one big video. We talked about the pros and cons for each team at this event, what their outlook is going forward, whether changes are necessary. If so, what might they be, and when might we see them? And yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. Follow and subscribe and look out for more. Thanks.